So good day everyone. So this is Jessie Tugonon, one of the student of Ma'am Karen. So today I discuss the topic that I have. So the topic that I discuss today is all about the sulfur cycle. But but before we going to the main topic or main discussion, I want to ask you some question and can you answer it in your mind? So, first, for you, what is a sulfur and sulfur cycle? Next, for you, where is sulfur can be found? Third, what is the color of the sulfur? Fourth, what is a sulfur is important in environment? And last, does sulfur help our environment? So next, for the objective of this lesson and this discussion, at the end of the lesson, the student will be able to know the meaning of sulfur and sulfur cycle, identify the different way to make sulfur, and understand the cycle of sulfur. So this is the objective for today. So for us, what is a sulfur? When we say sulfur, it is a pale yellow, brittle, non-metallic elements that occur widely in nature, especially in volcanic deposits, mineral, natural gas, and petroleum. So this is the sample of the sulfur, and this is the sample of the product of the sulfur. So next, what is a sulfur cycle for our main topic? So when we say the sulfur cycle is a circulation of a sulfur in a various forms through nature. It's its forms from nature. So this is the sample of the sulfur cycle, and this is another sample for the sulfur cycle. So for this lesson, instead of discussing in the picture that you see, I just want to discuss it in one by one or stage by stage for more clear and for more understanding. So the first stage to to analyze the sulfur cycle, it begins when sulfur from volcanic eruption, decaying matter and pollution is released to the atmosphere. It's released to the atmosphere, and the sulfur released from volcanic eruption is in the form of hydrogen sulfate. So this is the sample of the volcanic eruption, and this is the sample when the hydrogen and sulfur is combining, and it's called hydrogen sulfate gas. And for the second stage of the sulfur cycle, it will then be absorbed by the clouds. So from the heating, it's absorbed by the clouds, and this is only some of the heat escaped in the space. So next, and fall back to the soil with the rain. So after the clouds absorbing the heat from the mountain or from the volcanic eruption, it's contain the rainy season or the acid rain. So for the third stage, after the clouds that release the rain, as the sulfur weather, it absorbed into tree and other biotic factors like plants. So after the rain, the tree is absorb the water from the ground. And animals then eat the trees and plants and absorb the sulfur into their bodies. The sulfur moves through the food chain of the different animals. So when the animals eating the plants or the trees, the sulfur from the absorbing of the trees, it contains from the animals that eating the plants or the trees, and that's called a food change of the different animals. So, and for the third stage, the plants and animals die and decompose. Sulfur is released into the ground in air over time. So when the animals and plants is dead, the sulfur is released into the ground after the animals and plants are decomposed. So for the fourth stage, when sulfur ores are born, the sulfur combines with oxygen and forms sulfur dioxide. It then combines with the molecules in the air, creating the acid rain. So for the planta na nakikita natin sa ating paligid, it releases the heat air, and from the smoke containing or sulfur oxide, it's going to the wind, or we call the prevailing wind, and result the acid rain. And for the fifth stage, sulfur is released abiotically is through evaporating water. So from the releasing heat, heat air from the planta or from the volcanic eruption, the sun will be heat more, and from the water of the ocean, it's going to the clouds and make the evaporation. Once sulfur is released into the air, it is either deposited into clouds via water or put into the atmosphere. So once a sulfur is released into the air, it's either deposited into clouds via water. And for the last stage, sulfur is then redeposited back into the earth via precipitation and deposited into water bodies like an ocean. Some sulfur is also redeposited into the ground. So after the evaporation of the water from the clouds, it's going back to to our our ground, and that's called the precipitation. And this is the sample of the precipitation. So when the nitric acid and sulfuric acid is being together in the clouds, it releases the acid particles and gases and acid snow and acid rain. So after the releasing this, the sulfur will getting into the ground of the ocean. So then cycle then starts all over and all over again, and thus concludes the cycle or infinity. So this is the cycle, and this is the sample of the sulfur cycle. I hope you understand on what I say, and I hope you understand on what I discussed today. Thank you, and God bless us all.